Good evening. Thank you for joining us on virtual day trip to wine country presented by Citi. I am Sam Kimball from Crush Wine Experiences. We are here to discover new wineries, new winemakers, and some great new wines. And this evening, we are headed to Bakersfield, California, which is in the San Joaquin Valley. Big part of California, San Joaquin Valley. We're headed to San Rucci Winery in Bakersfield. And I think tonight we are going to find your next wine selection for Sunday dinner. Really interesting story. San Rucci is born out of Italian tradition and family, and they make some great wines. They have tremendous experience in the winemaking world and out in California and going all the way back to their roots in Italy, the family's roots in Italy. But first, let's zoom out from the San Joaquin Valley and the winery and put our visit in the context of California, which is very much on the center of the stage of American winemaking. California overall, you have to realize how huge California is as a wine producer, the state of California. And you might ask, how huge is that? Well, California produces nearly 30% more wine than the entire country of Australia. That's one data point. Another is California produces 90% of all the wine produced in the United States. And if California were actually its own nation, it would be the fourth largest winemaking nation in the world after Italy, France, and Spain. And you might wonder, with such a huge output and footprint in terms of winemaking, where is all this wine produced in California? Well, the fact of the matter is there are four primary wine producing regions: the North Coast, the Central Coast, the Central Valley, which is where Bakersfield and the San Joaquin Valley and San Rucci Winery are located, and the South Coast. And then within each of those massive wine regions in California, those can be broken down into smaller, distinct wine subregions, which, for example, in the North Coast are the Napa Valley, Sonoma County, which are two of the top California wine regions. And in turn, there are AVAs, or American viticultural areas, within each subregion. So Napa, for example, has close to 20 different AVAs, or American viticultural areas. Sonoma also has about the same number. They from time to time, they add a new AVA in a subregion like Napa or Sonoma or others. So smack dab in the middle of the great state of California is the San Joaquin Valley. And it includes the Central Wine region, as Central Valley wine region, as we mentioned. And San Joaquin is the backbone, you may know, of California's modern and highly technological agriculture industry. And largely because of the San Joaquin Valley, California ranks as the largest agricultural producing state in the nation, producing nearly 12% of the total U.S. agricultural output. So super interesting. We're headed to the San Rucci Winery in Bakersfield. San Rucci's calling card is small production wines in a family tradition. How small? We're talking about only a few hundred cases of wine a year. So this is a first for us in our show, profiling wineries and winemakers, virtual day trip to wine country. We've never been at a winery that is this focused and has such a small production and focused on those wines with only a few hundred cases per year. So it's really interesting for me, and I hope it is for you as well. San Joaquin Valley is right here on the map of California. Hopefully everybody can see this. Huge area. I mean, the state of California is gigantic. And this is all in that sort of orange coloring is San Joaquin Valley. It encompasses, golly, about 8 different counties, if I'm not mistaken. And then the other thing that's interesting to see for putting into context where we're headed geographically, is Bakersfield. So in my background, you can see over my shoulder, there's a red arrow that's pointing right at Bakersfield, which you can see again is right in the middle of the state of California. And you can see the valley is this the green area there that's colored green. That's the mountains are in the sort of off-white tan color. And so all that green is just fertile valley and agriculture and grape growing and vineyards and lots of stuff. One note, if you're interested in these wines, if you go to sanrucci.com, use the promo code CRUSH to save 15%. You know, while you're in the chat commenting, if you would right now, hit the chat and let us know where in the world you are tuning in from. Mark just raised his hand. Mark, if you put a question or a comment in the chat, if you would. The chat says, "Oh, the chat is disabled." Geez, that's not good. Let's enable the chat. Bear with me a sec, guys, while we attend to technical matters. All right, let's see. Let's see. Not sure why that is disabled. Usually it's not. Well, we will work on that. If you can't hit the chat, what you can do is go into the Q&A. There's a tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen for Q&A. Let's use that instead for any comments or questions as we're going, if we could. Excellent. All right. Well, without further ado, it is my pleasure this evening to host the winemaker and the co-owner of San Rucci Winery, Tony Mers. Welcome, Tony. It is great having you on the show today and beaming in from Bakersfield, California. Welcome.
Thanks, Sam. It's nice to be here, and thanks for having us on and sharing our story, the San Rucci story. Oh, and great job on the presentation of Bakersfield, where it is in the valley, and a good overall description of what the San Joaquin Valley is. It's definitely kind of fun to showcase that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in a small way have started thinking a lot more about where does food come from, where are the things that we eat and drink come from, and you know, they come from farms, and farms are in agricultural areas, and agricultural areas are critical to how we live, and I think that it's something people are more and more aware of, and certainly in this day and age. But I think going back a few years, people just thought things magically appeared, when they don't. They actually come from farms. You know, if there's no farms, there's no food, and if there's no food, there's no us. So it's
no wine.
And no wine, exactly. So Tony, it's great having you. You know, I think your story is really interesting, and your family. Tell us a little bit more about San Rucci. How and when did you and your family start the winery and get started on this journey that you're on, making wine there?
Yeah, absolutely. So our family were of Italian descent. San Rucci is a blending of our two family last names, of the Sanfilippos and the Beccaruccis. Sanfilippo's coming from Sicily and the Beccaruccis from Tuscany. Both families made wine at their house when they were living in Italy. And then upon the early 1900s, they immigrated into America and continued that home winemaking tradition that they brought from Italy. So my great-grandfather immigrated into Pennsylvania, and eventually him and my grandfather ended up in Canton, Ohio. And they would buy bulk grapes from California, make wine in their basement, and that tradition kept on going from generation to generation. fast forward to, the 60s and my parents being born, and my dad actually went to Fresno State in the late 70s for a winemaking degree. Once he graduated from Fresno State, ended up moving down to Bakersfield, and that's how we ended up from the East Coast into California, from California, Fresno State down to Bakersfield, and he continued a career in wine in Bakersfield, and that's where I ended up being born, was in Bakersfield, and where we reside today. And so I learned how to make wine from my father, and we are continuing on our Italian family winemaking tradition in my hometown, Bakersfield. So that's kind of the short, skinny version of how we ended up here and who we are.
No, it's great. And did you, when you say you learned from your father, like where did you learn? And in what was the equipment? What was the setting? Like where was that happening?
Yeah, it was in the backyard. So to give a little more context, my father was the winemaker, general manager of a large production facility, making daily drinking wine. And so while he was working at a winery, he ended up bringing a couple cuttings of Muscat Alexandria back to the house and planted them in the backyard. And as I grew up, they were just there. We ate the grapes. They allowed for shade along the house. And then when I was about 18 years old, I was curious about winemaking. I helped him out at the winery a couple of times, just doing manual labor around the winery. And so I had the Renaissance man idea of harvesting these grapes, converting them into wine. And I convinced my father that I should do this in his backyard. And so I picked the grapes. The very first year, the equipment that we used was incredibly rudimentary. It was a mop bucket to crush the grapes in, kind of like those ones, the industrial commercial ones where they have that squeegee thing that presses the mop to drain it out. That's how we separated the juice from the skins. I tried fermenting the grapes just in the kitchen, but being a novice and not knowing what I was doing, the very first vintage of what I would call the San Rucci 5th generation winemaking was not what you would consider quaffable. So then the next year, my dad kind of took me under his wing and said, look, I can't have an aspired winemaker be my son. I'm a winemaker during the day. I can't have him be my son and make, this undrinkable wine. So he taught me some of the ins and outs of, how to properly ferment white wine, how to, when to pick the grapes and how to age wine and how to blend wine. So that's where he and I started, in the backyard of our house in North Bakersfield.
Wow. And let me get this straight. You actually crushed and squeezed the grapes and the juice out of them using like what was essentially like a mop bucket wringer.
Yeah. It's definitely not the sexy romantic idea of winemaking, but hey, you got to have a start somewhere, and that's what we went down to Home Depot. There aren't really many options for small production winemaking equipment sales or to purchase around Bakersfield, and so we kind of were resourceful and used what we had around us. Kind of that whole Italian mentality of use what is around you and to make food or in this case wine, and so that's what we did.
Yeah, it's great. What a story. What a story. Well, one of the other things that I was curious about in learning more about the winery was, the fact that you don't have vineyards, right?
No.
You guys have a winery production facility to make wine in Bakersfield, which is for those of us East Coasters who are neophytes about California and that part of the world. Bakersfield is actually a town of 400,000 people. And technically you are what's known as an urban winery. Um, what is an urban winery? I mean, I'm not super familiar with. I mean, so many of the wineries that we work with on the East Coast from the upstate New York and in North Fork of Long Island, they have, they're in the countryside, and a lot of them have their own vineyards. Some of them don't. What's an urban winery?
Yeah, so an urban winery is essentially a winery that is processing grapes in an urban setting. So oftentimes you can find this, well, nowadays you can find it in San Francisco, Los Angeles. There are winemakers who have rented more or less a warehouse, converted it into a processing area to receive grapes, ferment wine, age and bottle wine, and then also have a kind of a shared space for tastings and events. So the whole concept is very similar to a microbrewery, if you will, where on a weekly basis, microbreweries are producing their beer, brewing, and have a location where they can share their beer with their community and followers and travelers as they are in this urban setting. So we took that idea. We don't own any grapes, any vineyards. We have long-standing relations with grape growers in different areas throughout the state that we formed in our commercial day jobs as winemakers. I haven't really explained that I worked for Gallo for 8 years. And so in that time, I've met grape growers. My father, his whole 40 years of winemaking career has been working with grape growers and winemakers. And we both have great connections to really quality vineyards throughout the state. And that's where we buy our grapes from and bring them back to Bakersfield, ferment them, barrel age them, blend them, bottle them, and share them with primarily Bakersfield or my hometown, but we also ship to different states, most states in the union, and we do virtual tastings just like this to kind of share our story with others. So that's really what an urban winery is. And like you mentioned, Bakersfield is in the last probably 15 years has doubled in size. It has a very close proximity to Los Angeles, which makes it appealing to a lot of people that are moving up from Los Angeles, kind of getting out of the hustle and bustle of really that urban core and coming to Bakersfield. And we're the only ones in town that are doing the urban winery setting. The goal of that was, one, we live here and we enjoy living here and we enjoy making wine. So it naturally fit to share that with our hometown.
So you worked at Gallo, which is the largest winery or wine producer's single company entity in the US. And now you're at one of the smallest wineries, right, in the US. What did you do at Gallo, and how did that sort of guide and allow you to do what you do today?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. I've gone from the most massive of massive wineries to probably one of the smallest wineries in the state. So my entry into Gallo was really kind of after college, I needed a job. I was traveling in New Zealand. I did a harvest in New Zealand. A friend of my father's was working at Gallo, and they had an opening, and we kind of connected, and it worked out. There was a lot of great learning experiences at a place like Gallo, especially for someone who was right out of college. So one, obviously there's the winemaking aspect. So you're making wine on a large scale. You get to learn how to blend and problem solve in a way that you don't often have to on a really small production scale, because you can control things differently when you're San Rucci size versus when you're Gallo size.
Right.
But I think one of the things I took out the most out of my time at Gallo was the opportunity to taste wines from different areas, get to know the growing regions of Central Valley and even some of the coastal areas. We would have weekly tastings of industry winemakers and just learning what some of the trends were on the market, who, even different regions of the world. There are some obscure wines from Russia and Eastern Europe that Gallo was able to bring in and share with the winemaking team, that without them and that reach, especially in a place like Fresno or Bakersfield, it would be incredibly hard to get those wines and have that tasting ability and connect with the flavors and aromas of terroir in an area that you've never been. So I think that's really one of the key things I've learned, I was exposed to then. And it just, the goal had always been to start a winery with my parents and my wife. And so the stars aligned after the years of working at Gallo. And when opportunity arises, you jump on it and go from there.
And your role at Gallo, were you at a certain point, were you actually making or part of the winemaking team, doing actual production and creating the wines that were being bottled?
Absolutely. So my first position there was enologist, which in the scheme of Gallo is the entry winemaking position. I was at their Fresno winery, which is a incredibly large production, large scale winemaking facility. I was there for about 3 years, worked up to assistant winemaker, and then oversaw the bottling operation for most of the wines coming out of Fresno in their Modesto location. That's where most of, I'd say, probably all the wines from $20 and below at the Gallo scale is coming out of. From there, I entered into a quality assurance position that allowed to travel, like traveling to different wineries that we were buying wine from to blend for either specific labels like, say, Malbec from Argentina, or a flavor profile for a new brand like Dark Horse Chardonnay. So I was able to travel and work with the quality assurance team to make sure the really, again, the really romantic side of winemaking, the food safety regulations that are enforced with the USDA and the US government, making sure that those wineries overseas were following those regulations. So I had a little bit different experiences, most of it being winemaking, actually a winemaker, and a little bit being a winemaking liaison for the quality assurance program.
What's great about that is you got sort of the full three-dimensional perspective on it, from production to quality assurance. You're trying to get on the outside and look back in and see how it's going. We have a question from Mark. Can you give us an idea, Tony, where most of the vineyards are that you buy from?
Yeah, so great question, Mark. Although we are based in Bakersfield, we buy a fair amount of fruit from the Central Coast, specifically Paso Robles. Within Paso Robles, the Willow Creek District AVA, Adelaida District AVA. We also buy fruit from San Benito County, which is south of San Jose, so a little bit further north of Paso, but still on the Central Coast. We buy some Zinfandel from the historic Cucamonga Valley, which is east of Los Angeles, about 60 miles.
Is that in the Temecula region?
It's north of Temecula. So Temecula is kind of straddling San Diego County and Riverside County, where Cucamonga Valley is San Bernardino County. So north of Temecula, say 45 miles, maybe an hour north of Temecula. So that's actually a really cool old area of California winemaking history, with dry farm vineyards that were set up by Italian immigrants in the late 1800s. There's about 300 acres that are still remaining. We've had a long-standing relationship with the family that owns those 300 acres, and we've been able for the last couple of years to purchase some of that fruit and make some fantastic Zinfandel out of it. But one thing I did want to share with Mark too is because my dad and I have this history in the San Joaquin Valley, we still wanted to showcase, where we are and what can be grown in the Central Valley. And so we will source some what we call gem vineyards that are kind of diamonds in a rough, or the kind of the gems that no one knows about. And those are from primarily Fresno to Bakersfield area in the San Joaquin Valley. So we have a wide area that we pull fruit from. Primarily the central part of the state is where we focus.
Got it. No, well, that's super interesting to hear. I mean, you cover a lot of ground with that. So question from Jan. With limited production, is your wine available anywhere in Washington state? Otherwise, he'll order some bottles with the Crush promo code. Are you available in Washington?
We do not have distribution in Washington at this time, but our website, we can ship direct to Jan via our website. Yes.
Yeah, but you can, yeah, that would be the only way you can get in Washington state, because they don't have distribution. They order from the website. How many states do you ship to, Tony?
Right now we're shipping to about 40, I believe, 40 states.
Is that right?
Yes.
Do you use a third party like service that helps you get to all of those different places?
Yeah, we have some. You have to maintain all the regulations in different states. Yeah, but most of the shipping actually comes from us. So we don't use a third party shipper, just third party regulatory kind of check box people.
Cool. So we're about to get started tasting some wine and profiling these wines. Really quickly, what are the grape varietals that you focused on when you started? And you've been making wine for about 5-6 years now. And then what was their particular philosophy or approach you guys took around those varietals?
So when we first started, the first release of red wine we had was a 2017 Cabernet Franc, and then a 2018 Benvenuta. We started out with 2 wines, simply a red and a white, just to help offer a little bit of variety and kind of break into wine sales. You know, being winemakers by day, it took a little bit of learning how to sell wine and get out and introduce ourselves to the marketplace, if you will. So the focus of getting the 2 wines, really, we wanted to keep some of our history of winemaking, specifically how my father and I are continuing the family tradition by making wine together. And that was the reason behind Benvenuta. It was it's a Muscat based wine that we learned. That's the first one that I learned how to make with him from the Muscat vines we had in the backyard. So that's why we started with the Muscat. And the Cab Franc was something interesting. It's from a different area of California that doesn't often get a lot of spotlight. It's San Diego County. It's kind of eastern, in between San Diego and Palm Springs. So it's really interesting, high elevation, desert kind of terrain. And Cab Franc is easy drinking, something that we obviously enjoy as well as easy drinking reds. So those are really the idea behind the start. As we've progressed to where we are now, we have really narrowed our focus into really focusing on Italian varieties grown in California. So we have Montepulciano, a Nebbiolo. The dry Muscat is very reminiscent of a Zabibbo from Sicily. Rosé, along the same style, a Rosado, a little bit lighter in color than Rosado, but then a couple of the California classics that tend to fall into kind of an Italian theme. Zinfandel, Primitivo, and Zinfandel are they're cut from the same cloth, very similar grapes, similar growing climates as Puglia in Southern California. So that's kind of our focus now, is really focusing on Italian varieties that are kind of unique to California, and they grow in these cool, interesting areas and showcasing them. They're all easy drinking. You can age them if you'd like. If you don't want to age wine, you don't like aging wine, or you are kind of like me and don't have the patience to age wine, then you can definitely enjoy them now. But like I said, they do have some ageability. So that's our focus.
Cool. No, that is great. Well, let's get started with these four. We'll start with the Benvenuta,
Yeah.
which is, I think that you guys talk about this as your take on a dry aromatic white wine. What are the grapes that make it? And let's talk about, how this came to being. What's the profile of this wine?
Yeah, absolutely. And spot on. This is a dry aromatic. Our take on a Zabibbo style, a dry Zabibbo style Sicilian wine. Like I mentioned, it's 100% Muscat Alexandria. Usually Muscat Alexandria in the Central Valley is made in a sweet wine, very similar to like Moscato or a late harvest dessert wine, incredibly well with heat. One of the reasons why we were not afraid of harvesting this from the sun-drenched Central Valley, and we think it actually has a place here. We'd like to showcase it on a larger scale because Muscat in warm climates are incredibly aromatic and fruit forward, and when cropped right and made well, we think it can stand its own against some of the other dry aromatics that are out there. But spot on, food friendly. I've had it with swordfish and a caper sauce. It's killer.
Yeah, I was going to say fish right away because it really. So I like to ask people, Tony. So, you just tasted it. Does this wine make you thirsty or hungry? This wine, even though it's got refreshing acidity, it makes me hungry. I started eating all my cheese while you were talking.
Absolutely.
So this is that food friendly. It just inspires you to dig in and enjoy the meal, and I love that. There are plenty of white wines that make you thirsty, which is great. You just want to have another sip. You're not that much concerned or worried about what you're eating, or even if you're eating at all. In this case, I love the food friendly nature.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it can, we say it goes really well with fish, obviously chicken, ceviches, but cheese, like you and I were just talking about a little while ago, Asiago, even American cheese, believe it or not, something just simple like that, this pairs really well with.
Well, a little earlier today, when I opened the bottle, I actually I had a slice of Swiss cheese with my taste of this wine, which was good, because it's Asiago is like an Alpine cheese. So Swiss cheese, Alpine, Asiago, there's a connection there.
Absolutely.
Super nice, really interesting wine. So the grape, by the way, just to be clear, is a Muscat Alexandria grape. So congratulations to you and me. We just got out of the limited American bubble of wine consumption that only says we only drink 4 or 5 grapes: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon. We just had Muscat Alexandria. That's pretty cool.
That is.
All right, moving right along, we're gonna do the 2020 Rosé. And this is our group, everyone watching. I see some regulars, and I see some new folks as well. Welcome to all of you guys, and thank you for tuning in. I know with our audience, Tony, they're pretty wine knowledgeable. So everyone here knows that rosé is made with red wine grapes. So what's the grape that you use to make, or the grapes, if it's a blend, to make this rosé?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a non-traditional. We call it a Rhone style rosé, but surprise, we use Bordeaux grapes. So we had a little bit of surplus of Cabernet Sauvignon that we didn't have a home for. And obviously you pick rosé a lot earlier than when you make a full-bodied red wine. And we decided to roll the dice, pick it early, make it into rosé, and it has really surprised us, because one of the concerns that we had with picking Cabernet early is that green bell pepper note that is so in its DNA. But I think one thing about where this vineyard, this is right next to that Muscat vineyard, smack dab in the middle of the Central Valley, warm days, plenty of sunshine. So I think even picking this grape early, it was in a ripeness state that the pyrazines, the green bell pepper notes, had already dissipated in the berry, and we got a really nice Jolly Rancher, watermelon, cherry kind of aromas to it. So Central Valley harvested Cabernet Sauvignon on skins for no more than 3 hours, fermented cool, typical rosé production process. And we try to bottle it really early. So these were harvested, if I remember correctly, in 2020. These were harvested earlier, like around August 15th, August 20th of 2020. And then we try to get in bottle right around December, if not slightly before December, because we don't want those aromatics to really dissipate. We want to keep them in there and have a really fresh, fruit-forward wine. And so that's what we feel when you bottle it really early. It does. So also, picking the grapes early, all that natural acidity is in there. So it's great acid, good color, and just an interesting rosé that's different than, say, Rhone style rosés. So instead of Syrah and Mourvedre, we're using Cabernet.
Yeah. Is it 100% Cabernet?
100%.
100%. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that the tasting notes are strawberry and raspberry Jolly Rancher,
Yeah.
which I get, because it's got like a fruity but slightly tangy flavor to it. How the tasting is going is to what degree. I usually pour myself a half glass of each selection. I have finished both the Benvenuto White and the Rosé, so there's nothing left in my glass.
That's good. I like hearing that.
That's a vote of confidence from yours truly. All right, so now let's move to the reds. And by the way, I should let you know, I don't know if you saw, Jan just ordered with the promo code, so your wines are shortly on their way to Washington State. To be enjoyed up north there. So
awesome. Well, thank you, Jan. That's awesome to hear.
So we're gonna taste the Cabernet Franc next. Now, I know, and I see Nancy is on with us tonight, and then Jennifer and a few people who know the North Fork really well. Cabernet Franc is the unofficial red wine grape of the state of New York, because New York is a cool wine growing region, unlike California, which is a warm wine growing region. And so just like palm trees don't grow in Brooklyn, but they do in Los Angeles, there's certain grapes that do better here because it's a cool region. And Cabernet Franc is one of them on the red side, Riesling on the white side. Tell us about a Cabernet Franc wine, and yours specifically, the 2019 San Rucci, from the state of California, and grapes that were grown out there.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm actually quite excited to get the East Coast review of this Cab Franc, because I do know about what you were saying. Cab Franc growing very well in New York, and anyways, so our Cab Franc is grown in San Diego County. For those that know San Diego, I guess, well, or can kind of visualize, we're not as far south as the Mexican border. We're more on the north side, so closer to Orange County than we are to San Diego, actually proper. Grown about 30 miles as a crow flies inland. There's a mountain range that separates the city of Oceanside from the high desert. We're on the eastern side of that, so we're at elevation of about 2,000 feet, right behind that rain shadow. So warm
so
days.
You're near or in the high desert itself.
Absolutely, in this vineyard, yeah.
And you're not far from that vineyard is not far from El Cajon and towns like that.
Yeah, El Cajon, I would imagine, Yeah, you're right. You're not overly far. No, you could drive there probably in 45 minutes. And so it definitely is a warm area. But the really unique thing about this vineyard is it's so late ripening. It's a late bud break, late ripening vineyard. And I think that's the key. Cab Franc from the sandy, broken down granite of that area. We typically harvest this as one of our latest harvests. So in 2019, we were harvesting around Halloween, and it was about ready to freeze. So we had to get peel the grapes off real quick. We fermented in bins. We did about a little bit over a ton of fruit. So not much fruit at all. The vineyard overall has about 5 acres of Cab Franc. We get about 1 acre. So it's not a huge amount of Cab Franc. Barrel aged in French oak, 100% new French oak for 9 months. We went 9 months just because we didn't want to over oak the wine. We wanted to really showcase some of the delicate nature of Cab Franc and kind of the freeness that it gets from this site without being heavy on mocha. So
And the nose on this wine, Tony, is beautiful. You get that cherry note, red fruit, and by the way, I've had mine open for about an hour, and I've had the glass was poured about 35, 40 minutes ago. It is getting better and better and better. So this is a wine I think that would age well. No?
Absolutely. I think I think it will. One thing that I really like about Cab Franc, and it's the tannin structure. It's not a massive Cab Franc. A lot of people are growing Cab Franc up in Napa and blending with it. And it's very big and bold, almost like a Cabernet. This to me has the tannin structure that I would rather have for a younger Cabernet. It's not Cabernet Sauvignon, but I would rather have this style of tannin structure. It's elegant tannins versus harsh in your face tannins. They blend well with the oak. You get a little bit of the mocha. It's not overly, in your face. The barrel tannins aren't all over your tongue. But you're right. There's plenty of plum. I get like really ripe, almost stewed raspberries.
Yep.
It's been a really nice wine to have on our tasting menu, just to get people's perspective on Cab Franc in general.
I'm going to show everybody. It's got a beautiful label, by the way. I love the line drawing of the press, of the grape press there, which is great. I also have I took away my virtual background. Jennifer asked if we could hold up the wine so people could see the color. So I'm going to hold mine up. I don't know if you can see that. It's a relatively deep burgundy red, not super deep. Yeah, there you go. So Tony, go ahead, Tony. Tell us a little bit about that color, because that's like right in the middle. It's not like black purple like Zinfandel.
Yeah, so I would agree with you. I think it's a ruby, but definitely on a lighter side. So the interesting, again, going back to the vineyard, it gets plenty of light, and I think the late ripening area with the cool nights really allow the wine to have this softness and make it not a big wine. And because of the way that they ripen, I don't think this vineyard will ever produce a super dark, intense color. And that I think is just kind of, I honestly don't know what clone of Cab Franc they have down there. A couple of people have asked that in our tastings, and it could be a clonal selection too that has this really nice, light colored, hue to it. But it definitely has all the things that you want out of Cab Franc. And if you like greens, this doesn't have much of the pyrazines. They're there, but they're very kind of in the background. So you don't get the pyrazine bell pepper notes. And I know there are some people that really enjoy that. They don't bother us, but we wanted to try to make a very fruity California style, light, refreshing Cabernet Franc.
Yeah, but it has a lot of flavor. It's not lightweight. It's in terms of flavor profile and aromatics. It's actually got a ton going on, but it's very, very drinkable. I don't have the bottle in front of me. I think the alcohol by volume is like 13.5 or 14.
Yeah, so on the label, we have 13 even. On analysis, I believe it was 12.9.
So it's really it's easy drinking in terms of the alcohol level. Mark made it a comment. Sounds like a Loire Valley Cabernet Franc. I think that's a fair assumption.
Absolutely, I would totally agree. When I've been out pouring for wine shops and different wine events, that's the comment I get the most about our style. More of a Loire style Cab Franc. So nicely done, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. So cranberry, strawberry, violet, a little bit. I think it's more cherry and raspberry.
I'd agree.
Is the notes.
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of cherry in the nose, in the aromatics. By the way, I had it with my brie. Holy smokes, it was absolutely fabulous with brie. You told me to get brie, I got brie, and it's like, whoa.
There you go, man.
Really good.
That's right. That's kind of my pastime, is drinking wine and eating cheese. So
it's mine too. I if I weren't reminded by others to like eat something besides wine and crackers and cheese, that's probably all I do. Yeah, super delicious. All right, so we're gonna move on to the last wine, which is the Montepulciano, which I presume is sort of very much in the tradition of the family.
So I would say yes. You're absolutely right. At heart, it came from the tradition of wanting to make a wine that is true to our roots. My grandmother's side of the family, my maternal grandmother, and her family hailed from the Abruzzo region of Italy. So it only made sense to try to make a Montepulciano. And this is our very first stab at it. We think it actually worked out really well. So alcohol in this is about 13.8. So not terribly high, but it definitely is higher than some Montepulcianos that you get from Italy. It has really nice color, has a purple hue on the side, but it's deep, dark, rich. But on the nose, like I said,
I'm ready for like something delicious. I would like to have this with like spaghetti and meatballs.
Yeah, absolutely. So short rib pasta, like pappardelle with short rib ragu, phenomenal. Pasta meatballs, phenomenal. My dad is a big smoker. He enjoys like doing like ribs on the smoker. Beef ribs with this is outstanding. But cherry cola to a T. I think, I'm glad you brought that up for the tasty notes, because I think that perfectly describes the aromatics, the richness, and the acidity, because cherry cola has a lot of acid on it, but is balanced with the sweetness. This is not sweet, it's bone dry, but the richness of the oak has that sweet oak aroma that some people talk about. And so I think the cherry cola is spot on. And the baking spice definitely from the oak. It's been a really fun wine. So this we released earlier this year around Easter time. We produced 46 cases of it. So we haven't talked about case production quite yet. But of the Montepulciano, we produced 46 cases. So the first year, incredibly small. The Cab Franc, we had, I believe it was 51 cases. Benvenuta, again, 56. So these are, like you mentioned early on, these are our small, handcrafted. We do all the work ourselves. My dad and I, and bottle it with our little hand bottler. So incredibly handcrafted with a ton of pride and linking the family history through and through.
No, it's great. When do you when do you go from a few hundred to a few thousand cases?
So within this next year, we're projecting to be around 700 to 800 cases. So the 2022 harvest will be bringing about 800 cases worth of grapes. So we're hoping the next couple of years to be in the thousands of cases, just to have enough out there to share with others and really get our name outside of Bakersfield and showcase our art and our passion with others.
Yeah, that's great. Well, listen, I want to thank you for doing this. It's been great visiting with you, learning about the winery. I got to get out there at some point and stop by. And
Absolutely. Yeah, come on out. So often, Bakersfield isn't often the travel destination. It oftentimes is in the traveling route of the final destination. But there are plenty of things to do here. There's a lot of country western history. I don't know if you've heard of Buck Owens, but
Yeah,
Buck
sure.
Owens was a hee-haw. There's a whole bunch of music, a really interesting music scene that's popped up in Bakersfield since. But yeah, anyone's welcome to come on by, stop by the Urban Winery on your way out to wherever you're going, and we'd love to host you.
And you have a tasting room, and people can come and hang out, get a cheese board, a cheese plate.
The tasting room will be open within the next month.
Okay.
We have the production space. We're kind of renovating it to have the tasting room with a little cheese board to get snacks. We can keep it cool in the warm Bakersfield heat.
Yep.
But yes, that in about a month or so we should have that open.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Mark and Jennifer, and I know we had Nancy, a few regulars, but a few new people that I want to welcome, and you guys should join us going forward. We do this every couple weeks. We've always got an interesting guest. Tonight we certainly did, and some great wines. We will be back. I believe it is August, let's see, 24th. We'll be back with Tres Sabores Winery, which is the original founder of Frog's Leap Wines, is Julie Johnson. She's got a winery called Tres Sabores in Napa. We're going to be back on August 24th, so join us then. And in the meantime, Tony, thank you. We'll see you at the new San Rucci tasting room very soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Stay safe. Thank you.